Olivia had been bedridden with Parkinson's for 7 years, and her children were always too busy building their empires, flying first class to exotic destinations, attending charity galas, and indulging in what they called living their best lives. Me? I stayed. I couldn't walk away. I was the one who bathed her trembling body each morning, who held spoons steady to her lips when the tremors were too violent, who read to her when her medication made her vision blur. In the end, she left her 3 luxury properties to her biological children, and all I got was the dilapidated cottage at the edge of Willow Lake, the one place her precious children wouldn't even consider worthy of fighting over. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I still remember the first time I changed Olivia's sheets while she lay helpless on the bed. Her condition had deteriorated rapidly after my husband James walked out on our marriage. An unexpected stroke compounded her Parkinson's, leaving her right side almost completely immobile. The specialist had warned us that she might never regain full function, but no one in the family seemed prepared for what that actually meant. No one except me. "A little to the left, dear," Olivia whispered, her voice a thin thread of sound barely audible above the classical music playing softly in the background. Bach's Cello Suite No. 1, her favorite piece to listen to during her morning routine. I gently shifted her body, trying to minimize her discomfort as I tucked the fresh cotton sheets beneath her frail form. Her once elegant hands, which had played piano at Carnegie Hall in her youth, now curled inward like delicate broken birds. "Is that better?" I asked, my hands working methodically, having perfected this routine over thousands of mornings. "Perfect, Sophia," she replied, her eyes, still sharp and perceptive despite her failing body, following my movements. There was something in her gaze that morning, something she seemed desperate to communicate but couldn't quite form into words. A heaviness hung in the air between us, unspoken but palpable. In the adjoining bathroom, I prepared her medications, 5 different pills arranged in a porcelain dish painted with forget-me-nots. A wedding gift from her to James and me, now repurposed as part of our care routine. The irony wasn't lost on me. I crushed 2 of the pills, mixing them into applesauce the way the doctor had suggested for easier swallowing. 7 years of this. Delicate dance had made me more skilled than many nursing assistants. I knew the exact angle to hold her head, the precise moment to offer water, the gentle rhythm of coaxing her reluctant throat to swallow. That particular morning, sunlight streamed through the bay windows, casting a golden glow across Olivia's silver hair. I had brushed it earlier, 100 strokes exactly, the way she had done every day of her adult life until the Parkinsons stole that simple pleasure from her. Now it was my ritual to perform for her, an act of devotion that went far beyond duty. "Would you like me to open the windows?" I asked, noticing how she kept glancing toward the garden outside. The roses are blooming early this year. Her eyes lit up, one of the few expressions her face could still fully form. "Please," she said, "and perhaps some tea with honey? The lavender kind." I raised an eyebrow. Olivia rarely requested anything specific to eat or drink anymore. Most days it was a struggle just to ensure she consumed enough calories. "Lavender tea? That's new?" A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "Not new, dear. Just forgotten for a while." I opened the windows, letting in the sweet scent of roses and freshly cut grass. The gardener had come yesterday, one of the few luxuries I insisted on maintaining for Olivia's sake. She had always taken such pride in her garden. Even now, unable to tend it herself, her eyes would track the seasonal changes with a botanist's precision. When I returned with the tea, I found her watching a pair of goldfinches flitting between the bird feeders. Her expression was so peaceful, so present in that moment, that I hesitated to disturb her. But she sensed my presence, she always did, and turned her gaze toward me. "Such a beautiful day," she murmured as I held the teacup to her lips. She sipped slowly, deliberately, with unusual focus. Perfect for lavender tea. Something about her demeanor struck me as odd. A new intensity, an alertness I hadn't seen in months. But I dismissed it as a good day. We had those occasionally, small gifts in the otherwise steady decline. I helped her finish the entire cup, surprised by her persistence. Usually, she'd manage a few sips before fatigue or discomfort would overwhelm her interest. But today, she seemed determined to savor every drop, her eyes never leaving mine. "You've got quite the appetite for tea today," I said with a small smile, half to her, half to myself. There was comfort in these rare moments when she seemed more present, more like the formidable woman who had once conducted symphony orchestras and raised 3 children while maintaining a rigorous performance schedule. "It tastes like memories," she replied, her voice suddenly clearer than it had been in weeks. I helped her back against the pillows, adjusting them just so, firm enough to support her spine, but soft enough not to aggravate the pressure points that formed so easily on her. Paper-thin skin, another skill learned through trial and painful error. "Would you mind reading to me?" she asked. The book on the nightstand. I picked up the worn copy of Mary Oliver's poetry that we'd been working through, page by page, for nearly a month. But she shook her head slightly. "No, the other one. Underneath." I moved the poetry book aside to find a leather-bound journal I'd never seen before. Its cover was soft with age, the edges of the pages gilded in what had once been gold but was now a muted amber. "This?" I asked, surprised. In 7 years of caring for her, I'd never seen Olivia show interest in a journal. She nodded, her eyes suddenly bright with an emotion I couldn't quite place. "Page 42, she whispered. "Read from there." I opened the journal carefully, the spine cracking slightly with age. The handwriting inside was unmistakably Olivia's, elegant, sweeping cursive from a time before her hands betrayed her. I turned to page 42 as instructed and began to read aloud. April 18th, 1985. James is 7 today. We celebrated with a small party in the garden. Elizabeth spent the entire time on her phone arranging some business meeting, and Robert barely looked up from his paperwork. But James, sweet, observant James, thanked me for the homemade cake and asked if we could plant a tree together to mark the occasion. We chose a sugar maple. "It will grow as I grow," he said. "I hope he grows with stronger roots than his siblings seem to have found." I paused, my throat suddenly tight. James, my husband, her youngest son, had never mentioned planting a tree with his mother. In the 15 years of our marriage before he left, he'd rarely spoken of his childhood at all. And now, here it was, captured in his mother's flowing script, a moment of connection I'd never known about. "Keep reading," Olivia urged, her voice barely audible. I turned the page, continuing through entries that spanned decades. Stories of James growing up, interspersed with Olivia's reflections on her other children. Elizabeth's determined ambition that left little room for family. Robert's quiet resentment of his mother's musical success. And woven through it all, her special bond with James, the son who seemed to understand her best. As I read, Olivia's breathing grew more labored. I paused several times to offer water or adjust her position, but she insisted I continue. The afternoon light shifted across the room, painting the walls gold, then amber, then a deep burnt orange as the sun began its descent. "That's enough. For today," I finally said, noticing how exhausted she looked. Her skin had taken on an ashen quality that concerned me. She reached for my hand with effort, her fingers cold against my skin. "Thank you, Sophia," she whispered, "for everything." There was a finality to her tone that sent a chill through me. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "We can read more tomorrow," I said brightly, trying to dispel the sudden heaviness in the room. She didn't respond, just gave my hand a weak squeeze before closing her eyes. I sat with her until she fell asleep, watching the gentle rise and fall of her chest beneath the Egyptian cotton sheets she'd insisted on using even in illness. Then I quietly slipped from the room to prepare dinner, a light soup that would be easy for her to swallow when she woke. But at 3:17 in the morning, I jerked awake in the small bedroom adjacent to Olivia's, some sixth sense pulling me from deep sleep. I knew immediately something was wrong. The house felt different, emptier somehow, despite nothing having changed. I rushed to her bedside and found her hand cold, her chest still. Panicked, I checked for a pulse, for any sign of breathing, but there was nothing. Nothing but the deafening silence of an absence where a person should be. I had no choice but to let go, my heart shattering as I whispered through tears that seemed to come from the deepest part of me. "Olivia." Oh, Olivia. She was gone, just hours after finishing her lavender tea and listening to stories from her own past. At 10:15 the next morning, Elizabeth stormed through the front door without knocking, her designer heels clicking aggressively across the marble foyer. The sound echoed through the quiet house like gunshots. Robert followed close behind, his face a mask of professional detachment, already on his phone arranging details with the funeral home before he'd even seen his mother's body. The moment Elizabeth entered Olivia's bedroom, she fixed me with an accusatory stare. "What happened? What did you do?" For a second, I nearly lost my composure. The grief, still raw and bleeding inside me, threatened to explode into rage. "What did I do? I cared for your mother every day for 7 years while you were too busy to visit more than twice a year. I bathed her, fed her, read to her, played her favorite music when her hands could no longer reach the piano keys. I was here. Where were you?" My voice trembled, but grew stronger with each word. Years of silent frustration finally finding voice. Elizabeth's eyes narrowed. "If you did everything so perfectly, why is she dead? What changed yesterday?" "She was 84 years old with advanced Parkinson's and post-stroke complications," I said flatly. "Nothing changed except that her body finally gave out. The doctor warned this could happen any time." Robert looked up from his phone, his expression cold. "If you didn't have some agenda here, why would you stay all these years? It's not like you and James were even together anymore." I stood completely still, staring at him in disbelief. Something in my gaze must have unsettled him because he quickly looked away, suddenly very interested in his phone screen again. Elizabeth's husband, Michael, who had been silently observing from the doorway, finally spoke. "Sophia, if you have even a shred of decency, just make sure all the arrangements are handled properly. We'll take care of the rest. The rest, of course, meaning the inheritance, the properties, the money." As if Olivia could be reduced to a balance sheet, her life measured in assets and accounts. The moment the funeral ended 3 days later, they started fighting over the estate. It was chaos. Raised voices, thinly veiled accusations, legal terms thrown around like weapons. No trace of genuine grief remained in the room, just the naked ambition of people who saw inheritance as their due. They divided up the Manhattan apartment, the beachfront property in the Hamptons, and the historic family home in Connecticut. They split the investment portfolio and liquidated most of the art collection. Through it all, I sat silently in the corner of the attorney's office, invisible until the very end, when Mr. Harrington, Olivia's longtime lawyer, cleared his throat. "There is one final property," he said, glancing at me for the first time. "The cottage at Willow Lake. According to Mrs. Reynolds's will, this property goes to Sophia Barrett." Elizabeth's head snapped up. "The lake house? That old thing isn't even worth renovating. The land might be valuable, but the structure itself is practically falling down. Robert shrugged dismissively. Let her have it. We've got more than enough. And just like that, I became the owner of a dilapidated cottage that the Reynolds family had all but forgotten existed. The one property they deemed worthless, too small, too rustic, too far from the cities they preferred. Sometimes the coldness of human nature cuts deeper than the sharpest blade. Olivia had endured a challenging life despite her public success. Her husband died of a heart attack when James was only 12, leaving her to raise 3 children alone while maintaining her career as a concert pianist and conductor. She traveled extensively, performing in prestigious venues across the world, but always returned to be present for her children's important moments. At least, that's what her journal revealed. The reality, according to Elizabeth and Robert, was quite different. They remembered a distant mother, too focused on her music to attend school plays or sports events. James fell somewhere in between these perspectives. In the early years of our marriage, he spoke of his mother with a complex mixture of admiration and hurt, respect and resentment. But when his siblings pressured him to pursue a more lucrative career than the photography he loved, he gradually distanced himself from the entire family, including Olivia. 7 years ago, when Olivia suffered the stroke that compounded her Parkinson's, James and I were already strained in our marriage. The pressure of joining his siblings in the family investment firm had changed him, hardened him in ways I barely recognized. When I insisted on caring for Olivia after her stroke, it became the breaking point. She's my mother, but she's not. Your responsibility, he had argued, his voice cold in a way I'd never heard before. We can hire nurses. She doesn't want strangers caring for her, I countered. She needs family. Then let Elizabeth or Robert step up, he snapped. I've spent my whole life trying to get out from under her shadow. I won't be pulled back in now. 2 months later, he moved out, leaving me alone in our apartment with only a brief note. I need space to figure out who I am without the weight of family expectations. I'm sorry. I never moved his things out. Instead, I moved myself into the small guest bedroom in Olivia's house, beginning the 7-year journey that had just ended with her passing. Of course, I've had moments of resentment. She was their mother, after all. How could they abandon her so completely? Their indifference chilled me to the bone. I swore to myself I'd keep going, if only to ensure Olivia didn't spend her final years alone and neglected. But now, seeing them tear each other apart over her possessions, not one of them offering a single word of thanks after 7 years of round-the-clock care, I felt like a fool. 7 years of devotion, and still I couldn't measure up to being real family in their eyes. The bitterness burned in my throat, impossible to swallow. But I didn't want to become someone petty or resentful, because Olivia truly had a beautiful soul. From the moment I married James 12 years ago, Olivia welcomed me with open arms. She taught me to make her famous apple strudel, shared stories of her tours across Europe, and never pressured us about having children. Life is too short to live according to others' expectations, she would say, usually while playing something hauntingly beautiful on the piano. During difficult times, she'd call just to check in, her intuition somehow alerting her when I needed support. After my 3rd miscarriage, when James buried himself in work rather than facing our shared grief, it was Olivia who sat with me through the darkest nights. Sometimes the people we love don't know how to carry our pain, she'd said softly, her hand steady on mine despite her early tremors. It doesn't mean they don't feel it. Back then, I didn't fully appreciate the depth of her wisdom. But now I understand. She was trying to help me see the complex landscape of family relationships, the unspoken hurts and hopes that shape how we respond to each other. Kindness has its own quiet power. As long as I can answer to my own conscience, nothing else really matters. The day after the meeting at the attorney's office, I drove out to Willow Lake for the first time in years. The cottage sat on the eastern shore, partially hidden by towering pines and silver birches. The gravel driveway was overgrown, nature slowly reclaiming what humans had abandoned. As I stepped out of the car, the scent of pine and lake water filled my lungs, clean, sharp, alive in a way the city never managed to be. Birds called to each other from the trees, their conversations far more meaningful than the hollow words exchanged at yesterday's meeting. The cottage itself was smaller than I remembered. A simple structure with weathered cedar shingles, a sagging porch, and windows clouded with years of neglect. The key stuck in the lock, requiring gentle coaxing before the door finally swung open with a creak of protest. Inside, dust motes danced in the beams of sunlight that managed to penetrate the dirty windows. The furniture was draped in yellowed sheets, ghost-like forms frozen in time. The air smelled of disuse and forgotten summers, a melancholy sweetness that caught in my throat. I moved slowly through the small rooms, removing sheets to reveal simple, well-made furniture from another era. A stone fireplace dominated the living area, its mantel still displaying faded photographs in tarnished silver frames. I picked one up, wiping away the dust with my thumb, and found myself looking at a much younger Olivia, laughing as she held a small boy on her lap. James, perhaps 4 or 5 years old, his smile wide and uninhibited. In that moment, standing in the silent cottage with Olivia's laughter frozen in time, I felt the full weight of everything I had lost. Not just Olivia, but the family I'd thought I was building, the life I'd imagined for myself. What am I supposed to do now? I whispered to the empty room, not expecting an answer. That's when I noticed the envelope propped against a small wooden box on the kitchen table. My name was written across it in Olivia's handwriting, not the shaky script of her final years, but the confident, flowing penmanship from before her illness took hold. My heart began to pound as I picked it up, turning it over in my hands. How long had it been sitting here, waiting for me to find it? And what secrets did it hold that Olivia had wanted me to discover? My fingers trembled as I slid a finger under the seal of the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of cream-colored stationery, expensive, heavy stock that Olivia had always preferred for her personal correspondence. The letter was dated just 10 months ago, when her condition had already significantly deteriorated, but her mind remained sharp as ever. My dearest Sophia, if you're reading this, I've finally found peace from this treacherous body that betrayed me so cruelly. First, know this. In my extensive travels across 6 continents and performances in 37 countries, I have never encountered a soul as genuinely compassionate as yours. What you've sacrificed to care for me, your marriage, your career aspirations, your freedom, I can never repay. But I have tried. The cottage may seem like a meager offering compared to what Elizabeth and Robert received. They will certainly view it that way. Let them. What they don't know, what no one remembers, is that this modest cottage sits on the most valuable parcel of all my properties. 50 years ago, when Henry and I purchased this land, the previous owner, an eccentric geologist, mentioned peculiarities in the soil composition on the northern edge where the birch grove stands. He had found mineral deposits that suggested significant value, but lacked the resources or inclination to investigate further. Henry and I were focused on providing a summer haven for our young family and dismissed his ramblings as the exaggerations of an old man eager to inflate his asking price. Last year, while you slept in the chair beside my bed, yes, I noticed how often you denied yourself proper rest. I arranged for discreet geological surveys of the property. The results confirmed what that old man suspected decades ago. The land contains one of the richest deposits of rare earth minerals in the northeastern United States, elements crucial for modern technology and increasingly difficult to source domestically. The mineral rights alone are worth more than all my other properties combined. Elizabeth and Robert, with their insatiable appetites for wealth, would have stripped the land bare without a second thought for the environmental impact or the destruction of what has always been a place of tranquility and natural beauty. I'm entrusting this legacy to you because I've watched you pause to admire a butterfly landing on a flower while the world rushes by. I've seen you protect a spider by capturing it gently and releasing it outside rather than killing it. You understand that true value isn't measured in dollars, but in moments, in connections, in the preservation of what matters. There is a safe, embedded in the stone fireplace, behind the loose rock on the right side, third row from the bottom. The combination is the date we first met, 06-1408. Inside, you'll find all the documentation of the surveys, the mineral rights confirmation, and several options for how you might proceed. You'll also find something else that belongs to you now. This gift isn't about the money, Sophia. It's about recognizing that family isn't always defined by blood. Sometimes it's defined by who stays when everyone else walks away. With all my love and gratitude, Olivia P.S. The blue leather journal you read to me on my final day. There are 84 volumes in total, chronicling my life from age 16 until my hands could no longer hold a pen. They're yours now. Perhaps within those pages my children might someday discover the mother they never truly knew. Or perhaps the words will speak only to you. The daughter my heart chose. The letter slipped from my fingers, floating to the dusty floorboards like a fallen leaf. I stood frozen, my mind struggling to process what I'd just read. Rare earth minerals? Valuable land? It seemed impossible, surreal, like something from a film rather than my actual life. I moved toward the fireplace in a daze, my fingers finding the loose stone exactly where Olivia had described. It shifted easily under pressure, revealing a small digital safe nestled in the wall cavity. With shaking hands, I punched in the numbers, 061408, and heard the satisfying click of the mechanism releasing. Inside were several folders containing geological surveys, legal documents, and land assessments. The technical language swam before my eyes, but the conclusion was unmistakable. Preliminary testing had confirmed significant deposits of neodymium, dysprosium, and other elements essential for everything from smartphones to electric vehicles to military technology. The estimated value, even conservatively, exceeded $40 million. But it was what lay beneath these documents that truly stole my breath. A small velvet pouch. I loosened the drawstring and tipped the contents into my palm. A ring emerged. Not just any ring, but Olivia's most treasured possession. A platinum band supporting a flawless blue diamond, surrounded by smaller white diamonds. I'd seen it in photographs from her concert days, but never in person. She had once told James it would go to the daughter who understood her best. Everyone had assumed she meant Elizabeth. I slipped it onto my finger, surprised when it fit perfectly. The blue diamond caught the late afternoon light filtering through the dusty windows, sending prisms dancing across the wall. Beneath where the ring had been lay one final envelope, smaller than the first, with a single word written on it. Proof. Inside were photographs, dozens of them, documenting visits I didn't know had occurred. Elizabeth arriving at Olivia's house when I was out grocery shopping, rifling through drawers in the study. Robert meeting with a real estate agent outside. The property, gesturing toward the grounds as if already planning its sale. James, my James, sitting across from his siblings at an upscale restaurant, reviewing documents with Reynolds Estate Planning clearly visible on the header. The dates on these photos spanned the past 3 years. All this time, while I was changing bed sheets and administering medications, they had been planning, scheming, positioning themselves. And Olivia, even in her diminished state, had been watching them, documenting their betrayal. The last photo stopped my heart. It showed James entering our old apartment with a woman I didn't recognize, his hand resting possessively on the small of her back. The date stamp was just 2 months after he'd moved out. While I was surrendering my life to care for his mother, he had already replaced me. I sank onto the sheet-covered sofa, dust billowing up around me, the weight of these revelations pressing on my chest until I could barely breathe. Tears burned behind my eyes, but they refused to fall. Perhaps I had cried enough over the past 7 years. Perhaps I had finally reached the point where pain transformed into something else entirely. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows, across the cottage floor, a curious calm settled over me. I carefully returned everything to the safe except the ring and the letter, which I folded and placed in my pocket. Whatever came next, I would face it with the quiet dignity Olivia had shown through her illness. I owed her that much. I owed myself even more. The drive back to the city that evening felt surreal, as if I were floating above myself, watching someone else navigate the winding roads away from Willow Lake. The knowledge I now possessed had fundamentally altered everything. Every interaction with Elizabeth and Robert, every painful memory of James, all of it now existed in a different context. My phone rang as I neared the city limits. Elizabeth's name flashed on the screen. I answered with a steadiness that surprised. "Me, Sophia," she began without preamble. "We need to discuss buying that cottage from you. It makes no sense for you to keep it when you have no real connection to our family anymore." 7 days ago, her words would have cut deep. Now, they simply bounced off the armor of Olivia's revelations. "I'm not interested in selling," I replied. "Evenly. Don't be ridiculous. What would you even do with that decrepit place? It needs a complete renovation just to be habitable. We're prepared to offer you $30,000, more than generous considering its condition." I pulled into a rest. "Stop," turning off the engine. "The cottage isn't for sale, Elizabeth. Not now, not ever." Her tone instantly sharpened. "Listen to me very carefully. You spent 7 years as my mother's glorified nurse. That doesn't entitle you to cling to family property out of some misplaced sentimentality." "Glorified nurse?" I repeated, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. "Is that what you think I was to her? What else would you call it? You were the help. Necessary, appreciated for your function, but ultimately not family. My mother felt sorry for you after James left, and this cottage is her pity gift. Take the money and move on with your life." In the silence that followed her statement, I could feel something inside me shift. The last remnants of the eager-to-please woman who had worried endlessly about fitting into the Reynolds family. That woman was gone, replaced by someone stronger, someone who finally understood her own worth. "Goodbye, Elizabeth," I said softly and ended the call. Back at Olivia's house, no, my house now, as I'd inherited the right to live there until I chose to leave, I found Robert waiting on the front steps. He stood as I approached, his expression an uncomfortable mixture of condescension and forced amiability. "I hear you and Elizabeth had a discussion about the cottage," he said, following me inside without waiting for an invitation. "That's one way to describe it," I replied, setting down my purse and keys on the entryway table. Robert sighed dramatically, as if dealing with a particularly stubborn child. "Look, Sophia, we appreciate everything you did for Mother, truly. But holding on to that cottage is impractical. The property taxes alone will eat up whatever savings you have." I looked at him directly, noticing for the first time how much he resembled Olivia around the eyes. The same shape, though lacking her warmth and intelligence. "I'm aware of the financial responsibilities." "Then be reasonable," he pressed. "We can help you find a nice apartment, something more suited to your situation." "My situation?" I echoed, raising an eyebrow. He had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. "You know what I mean. A single woman with limited income. The cottage is a burden you don't need." I walked to the kitchen, filling the kettle with water and setting it on the stove. Every movement felt deliberate, unhurried. "I appreciate your concern, Robert, but I've made my decision." He followed me, irritation beginning to show through his polished veneer. "This isn't just about the cottage, is it? You're holding on to it to punish us for not being here during Mother's illness." The accusation was so absurd I almost laughed. "Punish you?" "No, Robert. I'm not keeping the cottage to punish anyone. I'm keeping it because it was Olivia's gift to me, and I intend to honor her wishes." "Her wishes," he scoffed. "Mother wasn't thinking clearly in her final years. You took advantage of her diminished capacity." Now the heat of anger finally rose in my chest, though I kept my voice steady. "Is that what you tell yourself? That she wasn't of sound mind? That's much easier than acknowledging that she saw exactly who was there for her and who wasn't." Robert's face flushed. "You don't know anything about my relationship with my mother. I know that in 7 years you visited 12 times. I know that on your last visit, 6 months ago, you stayed for exactly 42 minutes before claiming you had an important conference call. I know that when Olivia asked about your children, her own grandchildren, you showed her photos on your phone rather than ever bringing them to visit their grandmother." Each fact landed like a precise dart, and I could see his composure cracking. "You've been keeping score," he said weakly. "No, Robert. I've been present. There's a difference." The kettle whistled, its high-pitched cry punctuating our conversation. I turned away to silence it, giving him a moment to collect himself. When I faced him again, his expression had hardened. "This isn't over. That cottage has been in our family for generations. We'll contest the will if necessary." I poured hot water over a tea bag, watching the color bleed into the clear liquid. The will was properly executed with Mother's longtime attorney and 2 independent witnesses. She was evaluated by a physician who certified her mental competence. But by all means, challenge it if you feel you must. Something in my calm certainty must have unsettled him because he took a step back. "You've changed," he said, almost accusingly. "Yes," I agreed simply. "I have." After Robert left, I carried my tea to Olivia's study, the one room in the house I'd kept exactly as it was during her lifetime. Her collection of vinyl records still lined the shelves. Her antique desk remained positioned to catch the morning light, and her favorite reading chair stood by the window overlooking the garden. I settled into that chair now, cradling the warm mug between my palms. On the small table beside me sat a framed photograph of Olivia in her prime, standing before a full orchestra, her arms raised mid-conduct, her face alight with the passion of creation. "What happens now?" I whispered to her image. "What am I supposed to do with all of this?" No answer came, of course, but as I sat in the growing twilight, the blue diamond on my finger catching the last rays of sunlight, I felt the first stirrings of something unexpected, not just anger or vindication, but possibility. Olivia hadn't just left me valuable land, she'd given me freedom. Freedom from financial worry, yes, but more importantly, freedom to discover who I might become when I was no longer defined by caring for others. For 7 years, my identity had been entirely wrapped up in being Olivia's caregiver. Before that, I had been James's wife, subordinating my own dreams to support his career. Now, for perhaps the first time in my adult life, I faced the terrifying, exhilarating question of what I truly wanted for myself. As darkness fell completely, I remained in Olivia's chair, the house quiet around me. Tomorrow would bring decisions, confrontations, beginnings. Tonight, I simply allowed myself to sit with the knowledge that everything had changed. Not just my circumstances, but something fundamental within me. Elizabeth and Robert saw only a dilapidated cottage of little value. They couldn't see what Olivia had recognized, that true worth often lies hidden beneath the surface, whether in land or in people. Their blindness was their loss. In the morning, I would drive back to Willow Lake. I would open all the windows in that dust-filled cottage, letting fresh air sweep through rooms too long closed off. I would stand on the porch overlooking the water and plan not just for my future, but for a legacy worthy of the woman who had entrusted it to me. For tonight, though, I simply whispered, "Thank you, Olivia," into the darkness, the blue diamond, on my finger a constant reminder that I had not been just the help after all. I had been chosen, seen, valued in ways that transcended blood and obligation, and that knowledge was perhaps the most precious inheritance of all. True to my word, I returned to Willow Lake the next morning. The cottage looked different somehow, not physically changed, but transformed by knowledge. What I'd initially seen as dilapidated, I now recognized as merely dormant, waiting for revival. Like me. I threw open every window, letting spring air chase out the musty stillness. A family of wrens had nested in the eaves, their cheerful chirping providing a soundtrack as I pulled sheets off furniture and swept decades of dust from the wooden floors. By midday, sweat beaded on my forehead, but the main room already looked more like a home than a forgotten relic. While washing grime from the kitchen windows, I spotted a sleek black SUV crawling up the gravel driveway. My stomach tightened as I recognized James behind the wheel. Of all the confrontations awaiting me, this was the one I felt least prepared for. I stepped onto the porch, wiping my hands on my jeans as he emerged from the vehicle. He looked thinner than I remembered, his once boyish features sharpened by time or stress or both. The sight of him triggered a complex cascade of emotions, grief for what we'd lost, anger at his abandonment, and something new. Pity. "Sophia," he said, his voice carrying across the yard. "You're actually fixing this place up?" I didn't invite him closer. "I'm making it livable." He approached anyway, hands tucked into the pockets of his expensive trousers, clothing that belonged in boardrooms, not on the shores of Willow Lake. "I tried calling. You didn't answer." "I've been busy." His eyes traveled over me, taking in my dust-streaked t-shirt and messy ponytail. "So I see." He gestured toward the cottage. "Mom really left you this place?" "She did." "And you're keeping it?" Disbelief colored his tone. "Yes," James sighed, running a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar it made my heart ache despite everything. "Look, I know we didn't end things well." "We didn't end things at all," I interrupted. "You left. There's a difference." He had the decency to look uncomfortable. "Fair enough. But I'm not here about us. I'm here about the cottage." "Of course. You are?" "Elizabeth and Robert think you're being unreasonable," he continued, ignoring my sarcasm. "They're prepared to offer you $50,000 now. That's $20,000 more than their original offer." I leaned against the porch railing, studying him. This man had once been the center of my world. Now he was a stranger negotiating a real estate transaction. "Did you actually come here thinking I'd sell to you? After everything?" "I came here hoping you'd be practical," he countered. "This place holds no sentimental value for you. You've only been here, once or twice in all the years we were together?" "And whose fault was that?" I asked quietly. "You always had excuses for why we couldn't visit. Too busy with work, too many important meetings. I never realized you were deliberately keeping me away." Something flickered across his face. Surprise, perhaps, that I'd connected those dots. "That's not true, isn't it? This cottage represented everything you were running from. A simpler life, family connections, your roots. The parts of yourself you were so desperate to bury when you joined your siblings at their firm." He stepped closer, lowering his voice as if sharing a confidence. "Sophia, be reasonable. This place is falling apart. The renovation costs alone would bankrupt you." I smiled then, the first genuine smile I'd directed at him in years. "I appreciate your concern for my finances, James, but I've made my decision." His expression hardened. "Is this about punishing me? Punishing all of us for not being there for Mom the way you were?" The question was so similar to Robert's accusation that I almost laughed. "Not everything is about you, James. Or Elizabeth. Or Robert. Olivia left me this cottage because she wanted me to have it. That's all there is to it." $50,000 could give you a fresh start, he pressed. "A new apartment, Maybe even seed money for that design business you always talked about starting. The mention of my long-abandoned dream caught me off guard. I'd once confided in him how I wanted to combine my background in environmental science with sustainable interior design. It was a passion I'd set aside when we married, when his career took precedence. I was surprised he even remembered. My answer is still no, I said, more gently this time. James stared at me for a long moment, then nodded shortly. You've changed. Yes. Watching someone you love slowly lose control of their body tends to put things in perspective. He flinched as if I'd slapped him. That's not fair. None of this is fair, James. It wasn't fair that your mother got Parkinson's. It wasn't fair that you left when things got difficult. It wasn't fair that I spent 7 years caring for her while you all built your lives elsewhere. I took a deep breath. But we're long past fairness now. He turned to go, then paused. For what it's worth, I am sorry. About Mom. About us. About all of it. I didn't respond. Some apologies come too late to matter. As his SUV disappeared down the driveway, I returned to my window cleaning with renewed purpose. James's visit had crystallized something for me. I wasn't just preserving Olivia's legacy. I was reclaiming pieces of myself that had been sublimated for far too long. That evening, I called Julian Mercer, the environmental attorney whose contact information Olivia had included in the safe's documents. His reputation was impressive. Harvard Law, 15 years specializing in sustainable resource management, a perfect blend of environmental advocacy and business acumen. Ms. Barrett. He greeted me warmly when we connected the next day. I've been expecting your call. Olivia spoke very highly of you. You knew Olivia? I asked, surprised. We met about 11 months ago. She was quite determined to ensure the Willow Lake property would be handled ethically if the mineral deposits were ever developed. We spoke for nearly an hour. Julian outlined several possible paths forward. I could sell the mineral rights outright for an immediate fortune, partner with a mining company that used sustainable practices for ongoing revenue, or hold on to the rights while developing the cottage as an eco-friendly retreat. Take some time to consider your options, he advised. This isn't a decision to rush. Whatever you choose, I'd recommend keeping the discovery quiet for now. Once word gets out about the deposits, you'll be dealing with more than just family. Pressure. His words proved prophetic. 2 days later, Elizabeth showed up unannounced at the cottage, her Mercedes raising a cloud of dust as it roared up the driveway. She didn't bother with pleasantries. What exactly are you playing at? She demanded, marching toward me as I stood painting the porch railing. I set down my brush. Hello to you too, Elizabeth. Cut the act. Robert had our lawyer review Mother's will more carefully. There's something strange about how this property was handled. It was separated from the rest of the estate years ago, placed in a special trust with its own mineral rights provisions. Her eyes narrowed. What do you know about that? My pulse quickened, but I kept my expression neutral. It sounds like legal details that would have been handled by your mother and her attorney. This goes beyond legal details. Mother was barely competent to choose her own clothes in those final years, let alone execute complex property transfers. The casual cruelty of her statement ignited something fierce inside me. Your mother was more aware than you give her credit for. Her body failed her, Elizabeth. Her mind did not. So you keep insisting, she snapped. How convenient for you that no one else was around to witness this supposed mental clarity. I regarded her calmly, except her doctors, and her lawyer, and the home health nurses who visited weekly, all of whom documented her cognitive function in their records. Elizabeth's perfect composure slipped. There's something you're not telling. Me? Mother would never have separated this property from the main estate without a reason. Perhaps she had her reasons, I replied simply. She stepped closer, her expensive perfume mingling with the scent of fresh paint. Listen carefully, Sophia. Whatever game you're playing, whatever you think you've managed to secure for yourself, it won't stand. We're having Mother's competency retroactively evaluated. We're investigating every interaction you had with her in those final years. If there's even a hint of undue influence, we'll take everything. I'd spent 7 years tiptoeing around Elizabeth's temper, making myself small to avoid her sharp edges. Not anymore. I straightened to my full height, meeting her gaze directly. You're welcome to investigate whatever you like. But before you waste your money on legal fees, ask yourself this. Why are you so fixated on a property you dismissed as worthless just days ago? Her expression flickered. We're simply concerned about Mother's wishes being properly respected. No, I said softly. You're concerned that you might have missed something, that in your rush to claim the obviously valuable assets, you overlooked something important, that perhaps your mother was several steps ahead of you all along. The color drained from Elizabeth's face. What do you know? I picked up my paintbrush again, turning back to the railing. I know that Olivia Reynolds was an extraordinarily intelligent woman who raised 3 children with very different values than her own. I know she watched all of you from a distance for years, seeing more than you ever realized. And I know she made her decisions with absolute clarity of mind. Elizabeth stood frozen, processing my words and what they implied. Finally, she said, "This isn't over," and stormed back to her car. I continued painting, the rhythmic strokes calming the adrenaline surging through my system. The confrontation left me shaken, but resolute. Elizabeth might suspect something, but she had no proof of the property's true value, not yet. That night, I called Julian again. I need to move quickly, I told him. The family is getting suspicious. Within 48 hours, I had a security system installed at the cottage. By the end of the week, Julian had helped me engage a reputable geological survey company to conduct a more comprehensive assessment of the mineral deposits. Their preliminary findings confirmed Olivia's private survey. The concentration of rare earth elements was exceptional, and with proper extraction methods, could be harvested with minimal environmental impact. We should discuss conservation. Easements, Julian suggested during our next meeting. It would protect the lake and surrounding forest permanently, regardless of what happens with the mineral extraction. The idea resonated deeply. That's exactly what Olivia would have wanted. There's something else, he added, sliding a folder across his desk. I've been researching similar deposits. There's a company in Vermont that's pioneered a new extraction method, slower but far less destructive to the ecosystem. Their CEO is interested in discussing a partnership. I opened the folder to find details of the company, Green Earth Resources. Their environmental record was impeccable, their profit-sharing model with landowners more than fair. Most importantly, they specialized in training and employing local residents, creating sustainable jobs in communities that needed them. This could transform Willow Lake, I murmured, scanning the proposal. The small town had been struggling economically for years, its young people leaving for cities with better opportunities. It could, Julian agreed, but it would also make public what we've been keeping quiet. Are you prepared for that? I thought about Elizabeth's thinly veiled threats, about James's attempts to buy the cottage for a fraction of its worth, about Robert's condescension. I thought about Olivia, who had trusted me with this legacy. Yes, I decided, it's time. The meeting with Green Earth's CEO was scheduled for the following Tuesday. I spent the weekend at the cottage, continuing my renovation efforts with renewed purpose. The front porch was now a cheerful yellow, the main room cleared and cleaned. With Olivia's journals carefully arranged on built-in bookshelves I'd uncovered beneath years of grime. Monday morning, I woke early to the sound of vehicles on the gravel drive. Not one car, but 3. An SUV I recognized as Robert's, Elizabeth's Mercedes, and a third I didn't know. Through the bedroom window, I watched as James emerged from this unknown vehicle, followed by a stern-looking man in a suit carrying a briefcase. They were all here. With a lawyer. I dressed quickly and stepped onto the porch just as they reached the steps. "This is quite the family reunion," I remarked, keeping my voice light despite the tension coursing through me. Robert spoke first. "Sophia, this is Martin Geller, our attorney. We need to talk." I assessed the four of them: Robert's false confidence, Elizabeth's barely contained anger, James's discomfort, and the lawyer's professional neutrality. "I have a busy day ahead, but I can spare 15 minutes. Inside, I didn't offer them seats. They stood awkwardly in the transformed main room, their expensive clothing out of place against the cottage's simple backdrop. Martin Geller cleared his throat. "Ms. Barrett, I'll be direct. My clients have reason to believe that their mother was not of sound mind when she transferred this property out of the main estate. They're prepared to contest." "Stop," I interrupted. "Before you continue, you should know that Olivia underwent 3 separate cognitive assessments in the year prior to her death. All confirmed her mental competence. Her estate attorney has video documentation of her explaining, in her own words, exactly why she wanted me to have this specific property." I reached into a drawer and withdrew copies of the assessments, sliding them across the coffee table. "You're welcome to review these. The originals are safely stored with my attorney." Geller picked up the documents, scanning them with a frown. "Even so, there's the matter of undue influence. Documented by the independent nursing staff who visited weekly," I continued smoothly. "Their notes specifically mention that I encouraged Olivia to maintain relationships with her children despite their limited visits, and that I facilitated every attempt she made to connect with all of you." Elizabeth broke in, unable to contain herself. "This isn't about paperwork. Something's not right here." Robert had the property assessor review historical records. This parcel was surveyed multiple times over the past year, geological surveys. Why would Mother authorize expensive mineral surveys of worthless land? And there it was, the confirmation that they had discovered at least part of the truth. I looked each of them in the eye before responding. "Perhaps because it isn't worthless at all." A heavy silence filled the room. "What are you saying?" James asked finally. "I'm saying that your mother was a great deal more perceptive and forward-thinking than any of you gave her credit for. I'm saying that while you were dividing up the obvious assets, she left me something whose value isn't immediately apparent to people who only see dollar signs." Robert's face flushed with anger. "If there are mineral deposits on this land—" "There are," I confirmed. "Extensive deposits of rare earth elements essential for modern technology. Conservatively valued at $40 million, possibly more." The shock on their faces might have been comical under different circumstances. "That's not possible," Elizabeth whispered. "I'm meeting with an extraction company tomorrow to discuss a partnership, one that prioritizes environmental protection and local economic development." I checked my watch pointedly. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to prepare for that meeting." Martin Geller recovered first. "My clients will expect a significant settlement, given these revelations. This property was clearly meant to remain within the family." "It has," I said simply, "with the family member Olivia chose." As they filed out, visibly stunned, James lingered behind. "You knew," he said quietly. "You knew all along." I met his gaze steadily. "I knew when I found Olivia's letter. The same day you all were dividing up her other properties without a second thought for what they meant to her." Something like shame crossed his face. "What will you do with it all?" For the first time since he'd reappeared in my life, I felt a flicker of genuine emotion that wasn't anger or hurt, something closer to compassion for the lost boy he'd always been, trying so hard to measure up to his siblings' definition of success. "I'm going to honor her legacy," I said, "by creating something that matters." After they left, I stood on the porch watching their cars disappear down the driveway, the blue diamond ring catching sunlight on my finger. Olivia had given me more than financial security. She'd given me the chance to become the woman I might have been all along, if I hadn't surrendered my identity to others' expectations. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new decisions, a new chapter. But for now, I simply breathed in the clean lake air and felt, for perhaps the first time in years, truly free. The Willow Lake Community Center hadn't seen this many people in decades. Every folding chair was filled, with dozens more residents standing along the walls, their expressions a mixture of curiosity, hope, and skepticism. At the front of the room, I stood beside Catherine Owens, CEO of Green Earth Resources, and Mayor, Diane Fletcher, feeling the weight of every gaze. As most of you have heard by now, the mayor began, her voice carrying to the back of the crowded space. Preliminary surveys have confirmed significant rare earth mineral deposits on the old Reynolds property at the north end of the lake. Today, Ms. Barrett and Ms. Owens will share their proposed development plan and answer your questions. A murmur rippled through the crowd. For 3 weeks, rumors had circulated throughout the small town. Whispers of corporate mining operations, environmental destruction, outsiders swooping in to extract wealth while leaving devastation behind. It was exactly what I'd feared, exactly what Olivia would have abhorred, and exactly what I was determined to prevent. I stepped forward, acutely aware that most of these people knew me only as that woman who inherited Olivia Reynolds's lake cottage. Some had been friendly when I'd ventured into town for supplies. Others had watched me with undisguised curiosity. None truly knew me or my intentions. "Thank you all for coming," I began, my voice steadier than my nerves. "Many of you knew Olivia Reynolds. Some of you might remember her from summers spent at the lake house decades ago, when her children were small and her music career was just beginning." Several older residents nodded, their expressions softening at the mention of Olivia. "What you may not know is that Olivia loved this place more deeply than almost anywhere else on earth. In her final years, when her body was failing but her mind remained sharp, she made a decision that surprised everyone. She left that cottage and its surrounding property to me, her former daughter-in-law and caregiver." I paused, gathering my thoughts. What no one realized, not her children, not even me initially, was that she had discovered something valuable beneath that land. Something that could change Willow Lake forever, for better or worse. She entrusted me with that knowledge because she believed I would make choices that honored both the land and the community. An elderly man near the front raised his hand. I recognized him as Edmund Hollis, who ran the local hardware store where I'd been buying supplies for the cottage renovation. "Ms. Barrett," he said, his voice gravelly with age, "we've heard mining companies are already circling. What exactly are your plans for that land?" It was the question I'd prepared for, the concern at the heart of every rumor. "Not traditional mining," I replied. "Not destruction. Transformation." For the next 30 minutes, Catherine and I outlined our vision, a partnership between Green Earth Resources and the newly established Olivia Reynolds Foundation. The rare earth elements would be extracted using innovative, low-impact methods developed in Scandinavia. The process would take longer, 5 years instead of 18 months, but would preserve the lake's ecosystem and the surrounding forest. Most importantly, we explained how the operation would be structured. The foundation would retain 51% ownership of all mineral rights, with profits directed toward 3 main areas: environmental conservation, education, and community development. "We're not just talking about extraction," Catherine emphasized. "We're talking about creating a sustainable future for Willow Lake, 35 permanent jobs, a technical training program at the community college, infrastructure improvements, and a guarantee that when the minerals are finally depleted, the land will be fully restored and permanently protected as a public nature preserve." The skepticism in the room gradually gave way to cautious interest. Questions came rapidly. What about water contamination? How loud will the operation be? Will you be hiring locally? When would this all begin? Catherine fielded the technical inquiries. While I addressed the community impact concerns, Julian Mercer, seated in the front row, occasionally supplied legal clarifications. Near the back of the room, a movement caught my eye. 3 figures had slipped in late and now stood watching the proceedings with tense expressions: Elizabeth, Robert, and their attorney, Martin Geller. James was noticeably absent. I continued without acknowledging them, explaining how the foundation would establish a community advisory board to ensure local voices guided every major decision. This isn't about extracting wealth and leaving, I concluded. It's about creating something that lasts, something Olivia would have been proud of. As the meeting wound down and people began to disperse, many lingered to speak with Catherine or me directly. I noticed Elizabeth and Robert making their way toward the front, Geller following close behind. Julian moved to intercept them, but I touched his arm. "It's all right. I'll handle this." Elizabeth reached me first, her expression tightly controlled. "Quite the performance," she said, voice low enough that only I could hear. "When did you become so interested in community development?" "I've always cared about sustainable design and environmental impact," I replied calmly. "It was my academic focus before I set aside my career." "How convenient that your long-dormant passion aligns perfectly with controlling a $40 million SAO resource. Is there something specific you wanted to discuss, Elizabeth?" I asked, suddenly weary of her insinuations. Robert stepped forward, his tone more diplomatic. "We've reviewed your proposal with our legal team. There are serious concerns about the foundation's structure and governance." Geller produced a folder. "My clients believe that as Olivia Reynolds's direct descendants, they should have representation on the foundation's board and a significant stake in the mineral rights. We're prepared to negotiate an equitable arrangement before taking legal action." I had anticipated this moment, prepared for it exhaustively with Julian's help. Still, the brazen entitlement stunned me. "Your clients had no interest in this property until they discovered its value," I responded, keeping my voice level. "More importantly, they have demonstrated no commitment to the principles Olivia valued: environmental stewardship, community support, and responsible development." "That's irrelevant," Geller countered. "This is a matter of family legacy and inheritance rights." "Actually," Julian interjected, having moved to my side, "it's a matter of respecting Olivia Reynolds's clearly documented wishes. Ms. Barrett has already shared the video testimony in which Mrs. Reynolds explicitly states her reasons for structuring the inheritance as she did." Geller's expression remained impassive. "With all due respect, our position is that undue influence was exerted during a period of vulnerability. The courts will make the final determination." "You're welcome to pursue that avenue," I said, "but before you file, you should know that Olivia anticipated this exact scenario." I withdrew an envelope from my portfolio and handed it to Geller. "This is a copy of a letter Olivia wrote to be opened in the event her children contested her will. The original is with the executor. She was extraordinarily specific about her observations of each child's attitudes toward Willow Lake and her wishes for the property." Elizabeth snatched the envelope from Geller's hands, her composure finally cracking. "This is absurd. More convenient letters appearing exactly when you need them?" "Read it," I suggested quietly. "Then decide if you want this battle to become public. The Foundation's work will continue regardless. The only question is how much of your parents' legacy you're willing to tarnish in pursuit of assets you never valued until someone else had them." As Elizabeth scanned the letter, her face paled visibly. Robert, reading over her shoulder, closed his eyes briefly, a gesture of defeat I'd never seen from him before. "You should have been a lawyer," Elizabeth said finally, her voice lacking its usual bite. "Or a chess player. You've anticipated every move." "Not me," I corrected her. "Olivia. She knew her children better than you ever gave her credit for." They left without further argument. though I harbored no illusions that the matter was permanently resolved. The battle had merely shifted to a different arena. The following weeks passed in a blur of activity: permit applications, environmental, impact statements, meetings with state regulators, formation of the Community Advisory Board. Through it all, Julian remained a steadfast ally, guiding me through legal complexities I never could have navigated alone. The cottage renovation continued. In parallel, the structure gradually transforming from neglected relic to vibrant home. I'd decided to make it my permanent residence, converting the largest bedroom into a home office from which I could oversee the foundation's work. It was there, surrounded by paint swatches and fabric samples for the living room curtains, that I received an unexpected visitor one rainy afternoon in late May. James stood on the porch, looking more disheveled than I'd ever seen him. His tailored suit was replaced by jeans and a faded sweater, his usually perfect hair slightly unkempt. "May I come in?" he asked when I opened the door. I hesitated, then stepped aside. Briefly, he entered, taking in the transformed space with evident surprise. Gone was the musty disarray of forgotten summers. In its place, warm colors, natural materials, and carefully preserved original features created a space that honored the cottage's history while embracing new life. "You've done amazing work here," he said, sounding genuinely impressed. "Thank you?" An awkward silence stretched between us, filled with the gentle percussion of rain on the roof. "I resigned from the firm," he finally said, the words tumbling out quickly. "Last week, I'm not part of the lawsuit Elizabeth and Robert are. Planning. This was unexpected. Why?" James ran a hand through his hair, that familiar gesture again. "Because they're wrong. Because watching you at that town meeting, hearing you talk about Mom's vision for this place, it finally hit me how completely I'd failed her." "Failed you?" "Failed myself, really." I gestured for him to sit on the window seat. I took the armchair opposite, maintaining a careful distance. "What will you do now?" I asked, genuinely curious. "I'm not sure yet. Photography, maybe." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Remember how mad Dad got when I said I wanted to study art instead of business? How Mom secretly bought me my first real camera anyway?" I nodded. It was one of the few warm family stories he'd shared during our marriage. "I found it last week, going through some old boxes. Still works." He paused. "I've been taking pictures around town. Nothing special, just remembering what it feels like to create something instead of just accumulating wealth." The sincerity in his voice was disarming. For years, I'd carried an image of James as calculating and cold, reinforced by his abandonment during Olivia's illness. This vulnerability didn't erase that pain, but it complicated my neat narrative of villains and victims. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked quietly. "Because I owe you an explanation. Because I want you to know I'm not fighting against what you're building here." He met my gaze directly. "And because I found something I thought you should have." From his jacket pocket, he withdrew a small, worn leather diary. It was Mom's, from the year we got married. I found it mixed in with some of my old books. My breath caught as he placed it on the coffee table between us. Another piece of Olivia, another window into her thoughts. "Thank you," I said, genuinely moved by the gesture. James stood to leave, pausing at the door. "For what it's worth, Sophia, she chose the right person. Not just for her care, but for this place. For her legacy." After he left, I sat with the diary in my lap for a long time before opening it. Inside, I found Olivia's familiar handwriting, more vigorous and flowing than in her final years. I turned to the entry from our wedding day, heart pounding. Today, James married Sophia, and I've never seen him happier. There's a quiet strength in her that reminds me of myself at that age, before fame and fortune complicated everything. She sees the world differently, not as a collection of opportunities to exploit, but as a delicate ecosystem where every action matters. I worry about how she'll fare in our family's shark-infested waters. Elizabeth already watches her like she's sizing up competition. Robert dismisses her environmental concerns as naive, but there's steel beneath her gentle exterior. Time will tell if James truly deserves her. Tears pricked my eyes as I continued reading entries that spanned our first year of marriage. Olivia had seen me, truly seen me, from the very beginning. Had recognized qualities in me that I'd buried to fit into the Reynolds family. Qualities that, ironically, had only fully re-emerged when I was caring for her in her final years. The diary ended abruptly mid-year, the remaining pages blank, waiting for words that were never written. But the final entry seemed prophetic. I worry about Sophia. She's dimming her light to avoid outshining James, modulating her voice to avoid contradicting Elizabeth, hiding her intelligence to avoid intimidating Robert. I recognize the pattern because I once did the same with Henry's family. It took me decades to reclaim my authentic self. I hope she finds her way back to herself sooner. There's something remarkable waiting to emerge if she can only break free of the expectations closing around her like a cage. I closed the diary, incredibly, moved by this glimpse into Olivia's perceptions. She had seen the cage forming around me long before I recognized it myself. Had watched as I gradually surrendered my dreams and identity to accommodate a family that never truly accepted me. And in her final act of love, she had given me the key to that cage. Not just financial independence, but a purpose worthy of the woman she always believed I could be. 3 days later, the Willow Lake Gazette ran a feature story about the planned development. The headline read, "Reynolds Legacy Reimagined: How One Woman's Vision Could Transform Our Town." Beneath it was a photo of me standing at the edge of the lake, Olivia's blue diamond ring visible on my hand, caught in a ray of sunlight breaking through the clouds. I kept a copy on my desk, not out of vanity but as a reminder of the journey. From invisible caregiver to just the help, to steward of a legacy that would outlive us all. In the quiet evenings, sitting on the porch watching the sunset paint the lake in shades of amber and gold, I often found myself speaking aloud to Olivia, updating her on the foundation's progress, sharing small triumphs, working through challenges as if she were still offering her gentle guidance. "We broke ground on the training center today," I told her on one such evening, 6 months after finding her letter. "The first class of technical apprentices starts in January. 30 people, Olivia. 30 local residents who will have sustainable careers because of what you set in motion." The wind rustled through the birch trees, their leaves catching the fading light like thousands of small mirrors reflecting the sky. In that moment, I felt her presence more strongly than ever. Not as a ghost or supernatural visitation, but as a continuation of the wisdom she had shared with me in life. I was no longer just Sophia Barrett, former daughter-in-law, former caregiver, former help. I was the woman Olivia had always seen beneath those roles. Capable, resilient, and finally, completely free to chart my own course. As night fell over Willow Lake, stars gradually appearing in the darkening sky, I whispered what had become my nightly ritual. "Thank you, Olivia, for everything. Not just for the inheritance that had transformed my financial circumstances, but for the far greater gift, the chance to discover who I truly was when I stopped living in the shadows of others' expectations." The cottage lights glowed warm against the gathering darkness, no longer a forgotten relic but a beacon of new beginnings. Inside, Olivia's journals lined the bookshelves. Her piano had been restored to its former glory in the corner of the living room, and her subtle influence permeated every room. This was her final lesson, perhaps her most important, that true legacy isn't measured in properties or possessions, but in the lives we touch and the values we pass on. And in that sense, she hadn't left me a cottage at all. She had left me a future. 18 months after breaking ground on the Green Earth facility, Willow Lake had transformed. The once struggling town now hummed with renewed energy. Storefronts that had stood empty for years housed new businesses. The community college had doubled its technical program enrollment, and housing development sprouted on previously abandoned lots. I stood at the edge of the observation platform we'd built overlooking the extraction site, watching workers in blue jumpsuits operate specialized equipment that barely disturbed the surrounding landscape. The innovative process developed by Catherine's team had exceeded even our optimistic projections, extracting valuable minerals while maintaining the area's delicate ecological balance. "Ms. Barrett, there's someone here to see you," said Mia, my assistant at the foundation. "She says it's personal." I turned, expecting perhaps one of the local residents who occasionally dropped by with homemade baked goods or to share ideas for community projects. Instead, I found myself face to face with a young woman I didn't recognize, early 20s, with striking amber eyes that seemed oddly familiar. "Hello," I said, extending my hand. "I'm Sophia Barrett." "I know," she replied, her voice carrying a hint of nervousness. "I'm Hannah Reynolds." The surname hit me like a physical blow. "Reynolds?" She nodded. "Elizabeth's daughter. Your former niece, I suppose." I hadn't seen Hannah since she was a child. Elizabeth had effectively cut me off from any contact with her children after James and I separated. The girl I remembered as a quiet 10-year-old had grown into a poised young woman. "This is unexpected," I managed, regaining my composure. "How can I help you?" Hannah glanced around at the workers, the equipment, the thriving operation. "Could we talk somewhere private?" In my office at the foundation headquarters, formerly an abandoned bank building we'd renovated in downtown Willow Lake, Hannah sat across from me, fiddling with the strap of her messenger bag. "I've been following what you've built here," she began. "The sustainable extraction methods, the community programs, the conservation initiatives. It's exactly what I've been studying." "You're in environmental science?" I asked, surprised. She nodded. "At Cornell, specializing in sustainable resource management." I tried to reconcile this information with what I knew of Elizabeth, whose contempt for tree huggers had been a frequent source of tension years ago. "Mom doesn't know I'm here," Hannah continued, seemingly reading my thoughts. "We haven't exactly been on speaking terms since I changed my major from business to environmental studies." The irony wasn't lost on me. "That must have been difficult." "Less difficult than pretending to be someone I'm not," she replied with unexpected conviction. "Which is actually why I came. I found these while cleaning out my childhood bedroom." From her bag, Hannah withdrew a stack of letters bound with a faded ribbon. "They're from grandmother, from Olivia. She sent them to me secretly, starting when I was 12. Mom never knew." My heart quickened as I gently took the bundle. "Secret letters?" Grandmother recognized something in me that my parents didn't want to see. An interest in nature, in conservation. She encouraged me when no one else did. Hannah's eyes glistened. "Her last letter mentioned you, said if anything happened to her, I should remember your name. That someday I might find you were more family to me than those who shared my blood." I carefully untied the ribbon and opened the top letter. Olivia's handwriting filled the page, warm and encouraging, responding to what must have been Hannah's childhood observations about local wildlife. The letter was signed, "Your fellow explorer, Grandmother Olivia." "There's more," Hannah said softly. In her final letter, she mentioned something about a trust, for education, for those who would protect what matters. Realization dawned on me. The Olivia Reynolds Educational Trust, a separate entity I'd discovered among Olivia's papers, with instructions not to reveal its existence until certain conditions were met. I had assumed it was another aspect of the Foundation's future work, not yet fully understood. She set aside funds for family members who pursued environmental studies, or arts education, I confirmed. the pieces finally clicking into place. I've been waiting for guidance on how to implement it. That's why I'm here, Hannah said. Not just for myself. There are others. Others? My cousin Zach, Robert's youngest son. He's studying sustainable architecture. And James's daughter. From his second marriage, Lily. She's only 16, but she's already winning awards for environmental photography. I stared at her, momentarily speechless. James had a daughter? A talented, environmentally conscious daughter I'd never known existed? Grandmother created a network none of us realized, Hannah continued. Connected us through letters, through small gifts that encouraged our interests, through the promise that someday we'd find each other. We were her real legacy, not the minerals, not the money, the next generation who would care about what she cared about. I felt tears threatening and didn't try to hold them back. She was always several steps ahead of us all. Over coffee, Hannah shared stories of the secret correspondence network Olivia had maintained with her grandchildren, those who showed a spark of her own values. While Elizabeth, Robert, and even James had pursued wealth and status, Olivia had quietly nurtured the seeds of her true legacy in the next generation. Would you be willing to meet the others? Hannah asked as our conversation wound down. Zach is skeptical. He takes after Uncle Robert in some ways. But Lily is desperate to meet you. She says grandfather talks about you sometimes when her mom isn't around. The thought of meeting James's daughter sent a complicated surge of emotions through me. I'd like that very much. As Hannah left, promising to arrange a meeting, I stood at the window watching her walk toward downtown, her posture reflecting a confidence I recognized, the same quiet strength Olivia had carried through her life. Later, that evening, I opened the safe behind the painting in my office, a security measure Julian had insisted upon, and withdrew the final document I had yet to fully understand. The Olivia Reynolds Educational Trust, with its cryptic instruction. To be revealed when the saplings seek the light. Olivia's metaphorical language had initially confused me, but now it made perfect sense. The saplings, her grandchildren. They had found their way to the light, to their authentic paths, despite growing in the shadow of their parents' expectations. Traced my fingers over Olivia's signature at the bottom of the document, marveling at how her influence continued to unfold in unexpected ways. She hadn't just given me financial independence or a meaningful purpose. She had created a living legacy that would continue through generations, a secret garden she had tended quietly while everyone else focused on more obvious treasures. Well played, Olivia, I whispered, smiling through tears. Well played indeed. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.